What does the French Foreign Legion have in common with the United States Space Force? Well, let me dramatically change my lighting schedule and tell you about it. The French Foreign Legion was officially created in 1831, but its history doesn't begin there. The Legion was the formalization of a practice that France had relied on for centuries. Like most military administrative solutions, the French Foreign Legion didn't create something entirely new, it simply reorganized what already existed. When people think of the Legion today, they tend to think of the discipline, tradition, and elite soldiers that make it up. But the Legion wasn't created to be elite. It was created to solve a political problem. In the early 19th century, France was unstable. The country cycled through revolutions, regime changes, and internal unrest. At the same time, France had no shortage of experienced soldiers, many of them foreign, unemployed, politically unreliable, or simply unwanted inside of metropolitan France. France had relied on foreign soldiers for centuries. An early clear example were the 100 Swiss that were hired to be a private security force in 1497 for the king, starting with Charles VIII during France's Italian campaigns that kicked off in 1494. Other units followed, and in 1567 a complete Swiss regiment was added to the Royal Army. These mercenary units were the origin of the phrase, "no silver, no Swiss." If you're wondering why mercenaries might be a better option than homegrown troops in the 15th century, keep in mind how fluid alliances were and how revolutions were a bloody and common occurrence. The guillotine didn't earn the title the National Razor for nothing. At least with a paid mercenary, his loyalty isn't going to shift, and treason is far less likely so long as the contingency of being paid is upheld. The most famous moment for the Swiss units came on August 10th of 1792, where they defended the Tuileries Palace from a mob on behalf of King Louis XVI, where 600 of them were lost, with only about 100 survivors after the incident. Alongside them were German units raised from the many states of the Holy Roman Empire, starting with the Landsknecht in the early 15th century. One notable, mostly peaceful accomplishment of theirs was partaking in the sacking of Rome in 1527. By the 17th and 18th centuries, German regiments were a normal part of French orders of battle, particularly as line infantry. Getting closer to the Foreign Legion's official organization date, in 1809 they joined Napoleon Bonaparte during his Austrian campaigns. Italian mercenaries, known as the condottieri, fought for France for centuries, especially after the Treaty of Bretigny in 1360. Their use included during France's 1494 Italian campaigns, recruited not from a unified nation, but from regions like Piedmont, Savoy, Lombardy, and Naples. They served France extensively during the Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars. These foreign units served a purpose. They allowed France to project power without relying entirely on domestic forces. They were used for colonial garrisons, distant campaigns, and operations that were unpopular at home. If they suffered losses, the political cost was lower. If something went wrong, the damage was easier to contain. In effect, these units acted as a buffer. They absorbed risk on behalf of the state. France suffered a major revolution that peaked in 1789 with King Louis Philippe losing his head. This is a long and complicated history on its own, but I'd like to make the point of one man's particular contributions. Benjamin Franklin convinced the French in 1776 to help finance and equip the American colonists in the Revolutionary War against Great Britain. That ate up the modern equivalent of about $13 billion to help their friend defeat their enemy. So, for all of you who love the red, white, and blue, don't forget to thank the blue, white, and red that crippled their own economy even further to help make yours a reality. In 1793, Napoleon became emperor, getting France out of the monarchy, but launching them into aggressive and expensive territorial conquests. In 1815, the French lost the Battle of Waterloo, which effectively ended the Napoleonic Wars. At this time, there existed 8 foreign regiments: the 1st Piedmontois, the 2nd Swiss, 3rd Polish, 4th German, 5th Belgian, 6th Spanish and Portuguese, 7th Irish, and 8th Italian. The combined effective was just under 500 officers and almost 3,500 troops. When Napoleon was defeated and the new reforms focused on imperial loyalty, these units were progressively dissolved almost entirely. France saw occupation by forces from Russia, Prussia, Great Britain, and Austria, known as the Allied forces. France was paying war reparations to these nations, going further into debt, and in 1818 occupying forces had left because that debt was effectively managed. This period saw the restoration of the monarchy of the House of Bourbon and eventually led to the July Revolution of 1830, where Bourbon's house's King Charles X was overthrown by his cousin Louis Philippe, who was at the time the Duke of Orleans. Militarily, France maintained multiple foreign regiments governed by different rules. France didn't need fewer foreign soldiers, it needed a way to control them. So on March 9th of 1831, King Louis-Philippe didn't invent a new force from nothing. He officially dissolved all existing foreign regiments and consolidated their personnel and resources into a single institution, la Légion étrangère. You see the same logic nearly 2 centuries later with the creation of the United States Space Force. The Space Force didn't invent space operations. Satellites, launch infrastructure, personnel, and doctrine already existed inside the U.S. Air Force. What changed was the organizational framework. Yesterday's assets were reorganized to meet tomorrow's mission. Guys, thank you for tuning in and watching to the end. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I originally filmed it a couple weeks ago for another project, but it doesn't look like that's going to come to fruition at this time. However, I thought it was a good fit for the content that we're doing here. My name is Derek. I spent 5.5 years in the French Foreign Legion. During the time, I met a lot of really interesting people from everywhere in the world. And so we've kicked off podcasts on this channel. You can check out that playlist over this way. Or if you're more interested in seeing Legionnaires in a more natural environment where we're playing with guns, then go ahead and check out the other channel, Voluntarily Engaged. If you've enjoyed this, feel free to like, share, and subscribe for more. Might get into more history of individual Legionnaires after this. I think that would be really, really interesting to kick off. But anyways, thank you for tuning in, and I hope to see you in the next one.